They all came and eagerly gathered around her. The prince at once began begging everyone to stay for tea and apologized for not having thought of it till then. Even the general was so amiable as to mutter something reassuring and amiably ask Lizaveta Prokofyevna whether it was not, after all, too cool for her on the terrace. He even all but asked Hippolyte how long he had been studying at the university, but he did not ask. Yevgeny Pavlovich and Princess Hch. Suddenly became extremely amiable and merry. The faces of Adelida and Alexandra, through their continuing astonishment, even expressed pleasure. In short, everyone was obviously glad that Lizaveta Prokofyevna's crisis was over. Only Aglaya was sullen and silently sat down a little way off. The rest of the company also stayed. No one wanted to leave, not even General Ivolgin, to whom Lebedev, however, whispered something in passing, probably something not entirely pleasant, because the general at once effaced himself somewhere in a corner. The prince also went and invited Burdovsky and his company, not leaving anyone out. They muttered with a strained air that they would wait for Hippolyte, and withdrew at once to the furthest corner of the terrace, where they all sat down side by side again. Lebedev had probably had tea prepared for himself long ago, because it appeared at once. The clock struck 11. Hippolyte moistened his lips with the cup of tea Vera Lebedev served him, set the cup down on the table, and suddenly, as if abashed, looked around almost in embarrassment. Look, Lizaveta Prokofyevna, these cups, he was hurrying somehow strangely, these china cups, and fine china by the look of it, Lebedev always keeps locked up in a glass case, he never serves them, the usual thing, they came with his wife's dowry, the usual thing with them, and now he's served them, in your honor, naturally, he's so glad. He wanted to add something more, but found no words. He got embarrassed, just as I expected. Yevgeny Pavlovich suddenly whispered in the prince's ear. That's dangerous, eh? The surest sign that now, out of spite, he'll pull off something so eccentric that even Lizaveta Prokofyevna may not be able to sit it out. The prince looked at him questioningly. You're not afraid of eccentricity? Yevgeny Pavlovich added. I'm not either, I even wish for it. In fact, all I want is that our dear Lizaveta Prokofyevna be punished, and that without fail, today, right now. I don't want to leave without that. You seem to be feverish? Later, don't interfere. Yes, I'm unwell, the prince replied distractedly and even impatiently. He had heard his name, Hippolyte was speaking about him. You don't believe it? Hippolyte laughed hysterically. That's as it should be, but the prince will believe it from the first and won't be the least surprised. Do you hear, Prince? Lizaveta Prokofyevna turned to him. Do you hear? There was laughter all around. Lebedev fussily thrust himself forward and squirmed right in front of Lizaveta Prokofyevna. He says that this clown here, your landlord, corrected the article for that gentleman, the one that was just read about you. The prince looked at Lebedev in surprise. Why are you silent? Lizaveta Prokofyevna even stamped her foot. Well, the prince murmured, continuing to scrutinize Lebedev, I can already see that he did. Is it true? Lizaveta Prokofyevna quickly turned to Lebedev. The real truth, Your Excellency. Lebedev replied firmly and unshakably, placing his hand on his heart. It's as if he's boasting. She all but jumped in her chair. I'm mean, Lebedev murmured, beginning to beat his breast and bowing his head lower and lower. What do I care if you're mean? He thinks he can say I'm mean and wriggle out of it. Aren't you ashamed, Prince, to keep company with such wretched little people? I say it again? I'll never forgive you. The prince will forgive me, Lebedev said with conviction and affection. Solely out of nobility, Keller, suddenly jumping over to them, began loudly and resoundingly, addressing Lizaveta Prokofyevna directly, solely out of nobility, ma'am, and so as not to give away a compromised friend, did I conceal the fact of the correcting earlier, though he suggested chucking us down the stairs, as you heard yourself. So as to re-establish the truth, I confess that I actually did turn to him, for 6 rubles, though not at all for the style, but, essentially, as a competent person, to find out the facts, which for the most part were unknown to me. About his gaiters, about his appetite at the Swiss professors, about the 50 rubles instead of 250, in short, that whole grouping, all belongs to him, for 6 rubles, but the style wasn't corrected. I must observe, Lebedev interrupted him with feverish impatience and in a sort of creeping voice, while the laughter spread more and more, that I corrected only the first half of the article, but since we disagreed in the middle and quarreled over an idea, I left the second half of the article uncorrected, sir, so all that's illiterate there, and it is illiterate, can't be ascribed to me, sir. See what he's fussing about, cried Lizaveta Prokofyevna. If I may ask, Yevgeny Pavlovich turned to Keller, when was the article corrected? Yesterday morning, Keller reported, we had a meeting, promising on our word of honor to keep the secret on both sides. That was when he was crawling before you and assuring you of his devotion. Ah, wretched little people. I don't need your Pushkin, and your daughter needn't come to see me. Lizaveta Prokofyevna was about to get up, but suddenly turned irritably to the laughing Hippolyte. What is it, my dear, have you decided to make me a laughingstock here? God save us, Hippolyte smiled crookedly, but I'm struck most of all by your extreme eccentricity, Lizaveta Prokofyevna. I confess, I deliberately slipped that in about Lebedev. I knew how it would affect you alone, because the prince really will forgive him and probably already has, maybe has even already found an excuse in his mind. Is it so, prince, am I right? He was breathless, his strange excitement was growing with every word. Well? Lizaveta Prokofyevna said wrathfully, surprised at his tone. Well? About you I've already heard a lot, in that same vein, with great gladness, have learned to have the highest respect for you, Hippolyte went on. He was saying one thing, but as if he wanted to say something quite different with the same words. He spoke with a shade of mockery and at the same time was disproportionately agitated, looked around suspiciously, was evidently confused and at a loss for every word, all of which, together with his consumptive look and strange, glittering, and as if frenzied gaze, involuntarily continued to draw people's attention to him. I'd be quite surprised, however, not knowing society, I admit it, that you not only remained in the company of our people tonight, which is quite unsuitable for you, but that you also kept these girls here to listen to a scandalous affair, though they've already read it all in novels. However, I may not know, because I get confused, but, in any case, who except you would have stayed at the request of a boy, yes, a boy, again I admit it, to spend an evening with him and take part in everything and so as to be ashamed the next day? I agree, however, that I'm not putting it right. I praise all that highly and deeply respect it, though by the mere look of His Excellency your husband one can see how unpleasant it all is for him. Hey, he tittered, quite confused, and suddenly went into such a fit of coughing that for some 2 minutes he was unable to go on.